My full name is LaToya, Manly, Spain.
Where were you born?
I was born in Freetown, Sierra Leone.
Can you tell me something about this place?
It's a beautiful country. Sierra Leone means mountain lions, lion mountains. So there are lots of mountains there. When I think of Sierra Leone, I remember the earth, the red beaches, one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, white sand, friendly people, peaceful people, and yeah, very, very beautiful.
Yeah. And how's Freetown?
Freetown is beautiful as well. Freetown has a long history. This is where the piece of land which was bought at that time, and slaves, free slaves, were repatriated back, and that's why it's called Freetown.
Memories, how was your childhood in Freetown?
My childhood was not in Freetown. Some of it was. I can't really remember so specifically, because as a child we traveled a lot. We traveled between Freetown, Nigeria, Britain. So there was a lot of traveling going on. And my childhood is more linked with my family, with my direct family, with my mother, my father, my brothers, and yeah.
Why did you travel so much?
My father and mother were studying and studied abroad, and my father had worked for a British insurance company. So that was part of the reasons.
And how was school?
School was also very interested in the different places. It had two sides to it because we traveled a lot. One part was like the excitement of going to a new school and meeting other children, and sometimes having to build friends. Most of the friendships were not sustainable, so that was a downside. And sometimes when you come as a new student in the school, everybody's fascinated. And then after 1-2 weeks, you're normal. And then you go through the process of trying to establish and building friends. Yeah. So actually, I can say like I have this. I learned very early what it means not to belong. And because of that, I also learned to adjust very fast to new situations.
Could you give me an example?
Yeah, like if you go to school, arriving in a new place, you have to learn the language or the culture or the feel of the people, how they feel, how they react, the mentality. And you have to build trust with new people and try to adapt to things which are new, which you would do differently somewhere else. Everywhere there are unspoken rules which you have to learn very quickly, otherwise you're outside.
Was there a specific strategy?
No, I can't really say that I had any particular strategy.
But how do you build trust?
I think as a child it's easy, As a child it was very easy because I wanted to belong quickly. And I can say that most of the time I had good experiences, and we were brought up to believe in the goodness of human beings. So it took me a while to learn not to be so trustful, I would say. But I could say trusting is something which actually is very natural to me. And it was the other way around more, that I have to think about, okay, why not to trust so easily?
But why did you need to learn that?
Um, because it's part of being human. I think that we have both sides, and that situations, I can say that many people are forced to live in very precarious situations, and it's a means of survival of the fittest. So sometimes there is a lot of competition going on in little subtle ways, and for those who are not privileged, little things matter a lot. They have to fight more for space. And yeah, of course, also the roles change constantly from being privileged and being, yeah, not so privileged.
We were at the struggle. I mean, in your life in Sierra Leone, Nigeria, or something, did you see something like that?
Yes, in school there were major class differences. So some of my classmates had to walk before school, they had to walk to school. Um, After school, had huge responsibilities where maybe here others would say it's child labor and child abuse and this. But for them it was normal. But I realized some people have a very, very um, huge burden to carry, you know, and um, some questions were not answered then, like why this huge difference, you know? And at some point I tried to make up for it by giving stuff away, you know, but that didn't work out.
Why?
I think somewhere I thought I could make things easier for my friends, and it didn't work out because I think it wasn't empowering. I think there's something about giving stuff away and having to receive, which is could be demeaning. And even though they were grateful or asked for things, it really didn't lead to a real relationship. The friendships remained very, very superficial, I would say, and unsatisfactory for both sides. And later on, I was lucky to visit some of my friends in their homes, and I realized how rich they were, how much love can be found in a little space, how much more intimate they were, how much more they were closer to being to their ethnicities, the languages, the cultures. It became very, very interesting. I can say yes, then I gained a lot of experience and yeah, wealth of knowledge. And eventually I preferred going to visit them than being home.
What was lacking?
At home? At home, what was lacking? I'm not sure if I could say something was lacking, but it wasn't, I would say it wasn't authentic. Something about home did not really nurture my spirit. My parents are from the post-colonial era, and I would say a lot of things were designed more towards the Eurocentric worldview and perception, education, and the way we lived. We had to we spoke English. We didn't learn to speak local languages, And yeah, and there's this, this is one of the legacies, I would say, of colonialism, that they took a lot of the indigenous way of life was really pushed down, pushed back, not good enough. And you had like the generation that took over had ideals and which were all fashioned according to the to Europe, to the West. So, and you had other people who probably circumstances, because they were not so privileged, had the luck to maintain their worldview, their traditions.
What happened after school?
Yeah, after school, I came to Germany on a exchange year. So I was here for 1 year and worked in a handicapped home. Before that, I think I went 6 months to language school. It took me a long time. It took me a really long time to find a place which would take me for the year, for the social year. Most of the other exchangees had a place like after 3 months. Originally, the year was designed to be here 3 months, learn the language, and then you go into a social year or school. And I wanted to gain some work experience in the social field. And I couldn't get a place till, I think, after 6 months. Yeah. So that was directly after school, yeah.
Because we have people from different generations, something. Can you tell me when was it?
This was about 86.
So how was to which city did you come?
I came to Hamburg.
Hamburg.
Yeah.
How was Hamburg for you, 1986?
1900. Yeah, it was a beautiful place. Oh, as you know, it was beautiful. I loved the lake in the middle of the city. But it was a very lonely place. First of all, there were not so many African women or black women. There were some Africans, but men, and usually much older than I was. So I was a bit out of place, I would say. And it was much more racist than now. I really had problems making friends with Germans, which I hadn't imagined. I thought it would be much easier. But that wasn't the case.
What did they do?
They were just not interested. They were not. They were not interested in people from other cultures, I would say. Those my age. I didn't really have any bad experience with children my age that they did anything, but just wasn't possible to make friends. And I did, the first work I had was in a kindergarten, and I remember the children, the first day was interesting, and the second day they didn't want to sit near me. And I had the kindergarten trying to explain, it's okay. But it just was, it wasn't it never got better, you know. I was there for like 3 months, and children wouldn't let me cut their fruit, you know, things like that. And I remember there was a Japanese little girl, and she was a bit different. And the mother was always very friendly and would, you know, bring gifts and say, "Don't worry, don't worry." Yeah. So like, but when I think back to those days, I think a lot of change has happened. Because I had the opportunity of working again in kindergarten. Somebody asked for a workshop, and I was like, oh. And then I went, and it was a totally different experience. So a lot has changed.
In what sense?
Well, the children were much more open, friendly. It wasn't this type of backward racism of, no, I don't want to sit near you, or don't touch my food, or this type of, I haven't experienced that anymore. Yeah. And a lot of it also has to do with the family, how the children are raised and what type of discussions come up and what they hear their parents, because children pick up a lot of, much more than we think. And yeah, they are more open if the parents are more open. If a parent is, yes, normal, you notice it in the children. And I think generally the perspective people have on black people is more open now.
What happened afterwards?
Yeah, afterwards, after the year, then I went back, and I studied a bit and worked and came back again, because while I was here I had met my ex-husband, and so the ties to Germany never really broke.
How did you meet him?
Yeah, we met in a club. The family of I stayed in a guest family when I was an exchange student, and he was a family friend, more or less. And this is how they introduced us. Yeah, we know somebody also from Sierra Leone, and then we got introduced.
So what year did you come back?
94.
94?
Yes.
So
I was here in and out. 92 I was here, but permanently 94.
So how was life in Hamburg 1994?
94 was a difficult time, I think. I think it was a difficult time. Compared to the first time I came, where people were more or less disinterested, cold, I could say in 94, people were really aggressive. They were very aggressive, unfriendly. The climate was not really so positive towards foreigners or black people. Yeah.
Could you give me an example?
Example could be, yeah. One example is, for example, like sitting in the train, and some elderly woman started to shout, and, you know, because I sat near her, and she was like, "Yeah, get up, get away, you prostitute. Prostitutes must leave Germany." You know, she was really shouting, and I was so embarrassed. And yeah, nobody says anything or stands for you, and you know, this kind of experiences. Yeah, a friend of mine was spat on in the train, so we tried to say, well, this is not okay, you know, racist and this, but still. So that happened a few times. Such incidents happened a few times. a friend from South America was attacked by a man right in the middle of town, Jungfernstieg, for no reason. Yeah. So it wasn't really, yeah, it was a bit aggressive. I could say sometimes, yeah, I walked about consciously looking and trying to make sure somebody, does he look like he's going to attack, or does she look like she's going to spit? And if I got into the train, I made sure I sat somewhere where nobody is. Things like that, yeah. Yeah, this was in 94.
So, and how was the time with now your unified family?
Yeah, with my unified family in, what do you mean?
I mean, like you got married and you are now in Hamburg. So how was life like as a couple?
As a couple, um, as a couple was good. I think. I think that was a good time. It was good to have a family, to have a sense that gave Hamburg a kind of sense of home. That having a family does bring home into your heart somehow. Yes. And there are lots of memories with the children. Places start to have emotional value. Yeah, it was a good time.
What happened next?
So, with kind of parallel things also happening. Parallel things happening, like my first daughter. When I came, the second time, I came alone because I came from Sierra Leone, and there was the war was starting, and I had left her with my mother. So I came, and then to see how things are, and then she could come. But this was a very, very big struggle with the immigration department to get her to come. And eventually, my mother brought her with a tourist visa, and then we kept her here. And but she never got a residence permit. And we spent a lot of money and a lot of energy trying to get the status legalized and this, but it was a major problem. And eventually, she had to go back. So in between, one way I started having this conflict feeling of here being a home, at the same time a conflict of not really a home because there were other issues going on, you know. So, and I remember like my parents saying, but why don't you just leave the place? They don't want you there. So that was also a major struggle which we had as a family, and which went on for many years. And eventually she could come, and went through her Ausbildung as a Visagistin in Nuremberg. And one day her friends just called me and said, oh, we can't find her. And I'm like, but why? She's supposed to come and visit me. Why can't you find her? And then I started to call, and I went over there. And it turned out she had been arrested by the police because she had finished her Ausbildung. And when she went to the immigration, they asked her, okay, you're finished, so your visa is gone. She says, no, but I want to visit my mother in Hamburg. I'm going there. And then they locked her up because according to their law, if a foreigner is suspected of wanting to go underground, or if there's a danger that a foreigner might go underground, then they have a right to arrest her. So, so I went there, and a lot of fighting with the immigration till I finally found out where she was, and I went to see her, and it was really just a prison, a prison, and she was there with all these, giving up, and normally she's very, very extrovertive and shouting and loud and she couldn't say a word. I was there for like 1 hour, and the whole time she was just crying, crying, crying because she had never imagined that would happen. And she also felt very German because in school she was very loved with all her friends, and grew up more or less here. So she never saw herself as a foreigner, and I think that was a major shock for her at the time, or for all of us, like that. Yeah. So these are kind of parallel things going on between having a family and building relationships with people, close relationships. Over the years, you have really good friends who you trust, who you love, who are like family, or are family, have become family. And at the same time, you have the parallel thing going that you're constantly reminded this is not your home.
What happened to your daughter?
Well, she had to go back, and she wanted to go back. She was, at that time, her partner was an American, Guyana origin, and they had wanted to leave Germany anyway because they were going to visit my mother and go to the States, and yeah, but that was not possible. Yeah, so she was really very, very traumatized by the whole thing. I gathered enough money and had her out, took her to make sure she came out, and I was really, really angry with the immigration, and yeah. So that was, yeah. So then I wish I had links to activists or other movements or something. I did feel alone a lot in such struggles. From the family, I would say most people were very, very believed in rules and not creating problems and things like that. So, but I was really emotionally so upset at the unfairness of the whole thing, that it seemed to me sometimes like misuse of power, like people were in positions where they had the right to misuse the power and denying basic human rights. And I didn't understand that. I still don't understand that. Yeah.
How's the relationship now?
Our relationship is very good. Yeah. It's very good.
So you mentioned that you wanted to have the urge to find activists or something, that you were... what happened after that time?
Yeah, after that time I did what I thought I could, like write letters, and in Hamburg then they had I think a Beauftragte. I think in Hamburg it was called then Auslandsbeauftragte. And I was checking everything on the internet and going everywhere, and I met with her, And she was like, I understand you totally, but there's nothing I can do. I really feel so sorry, you know. And it was always either you met people and they were felt so sorry, but there was nothing they could do, even though they had some kind of title, or they had some power and they didn't care. And it was just very difficult. Eventually, nothing happened because the school, there was a teacher who did try when she was younger, the first struggle. So I could say Maria, she went through different struggles here, you know. She experienced everything from when she was younger, and all the threats of deportation were there. And her teacher did try, they wrote letters and we went everywhere. The only thing we didn't do was with the press, because we had discussions on that, and some were like, yeah, it could be psychologically bad for the child and this and that, and it's negative. So eventually I kind of thought, okay, maybe not, maybe it's not so good, you know. Yeah, so that was one part of the struggle. And then later on, as an adult, more or less adult, teenager, and then afterwards when she finished her Ausbildung here. So yeah, I just knew this is not okay and something has to be done. And I couldn't believe that I had exhausted all means there were, you know. I mean, I had exhausted all legal means, going to every lawyer and try a better one. I know a better one and all these things, but it didn't bring any result, you know. And I wasn't so happy with the whole situation. On one hand, you have a law which says children have a right to be with the parents, and then it's such a big struggle to remain as a family. Eventually, later, I started to hear similar cases again. And I like, oh, that happened to me. That happened to you too? And some part then I started saying, no, we have to do something. And I started writing to people or talking to lawyers and things like that. And eventually somebody contacted me, oh yeah, we're doing this too, come along. And I was like, oh. And then I realized that there were different groups, you know, active and doing things against a lot of resistance. Not like now, it's a bit more easier. But at that time, most of the people who were active were asylum seekers. And they really suffered a lot of repression, because you were not allowed to move within a certain region. You were confined to a certain space. The police were always very unfriendly and checking your papers, and so it wasn't really easy to be active then. But yeah, so this is how the activism started, more or less. Yeah.
So when it wasn't easy, how did you do it?
Yeah, meeting, first continuous meetings at home, wherever possible, and organizing with others, at least sharing experiences, trying to make the whole situation public, connecting with other groups working on the same themes. Yeah. And eventually, like a lot of thanks to like groups like The Voice, Caravan, who were a bit more radical, then things started to shift a little bit. In that, yeah.
You mentioned meetings, so how did such a meeting look like?
How did the meetings look like? Sometimes the meetings were at home, at somebody's home, and 6, 7, 8 people together and going through the laws, and somebody has more experience about what exactly is in the policies and in the regulations and what they mean, and experiences with certain officials. There were certain officials then, for example, in the Bieber house, and they said, oh, Herr Kruger, he's always difficult, or, and experiences like that, and with the police and what one could do. And yeah, at the same time, there were also activists giving lectures. Some refugees or asylum seekers were already politically active at home. And so they came with also a wealth of knowledge which they were sharing on how to organize, how to resist, And this was also very valuable. There was then like the black community in Hamburg started to build, and Senfo Tongkam was giving lots of lectures, and yeah.
And how did you connect? Because like nowadays you have emails or something like that. Back in the days it wasn't possible.
Well, telephone and set a meeting date, and then that was it. It was actually not so complicated then. I mean, it was actually very simple. Now I think with the emails, although it's supposed to simplify things, does in a way complicate things. Yeah.
So, how were the first efforts?
Yeah, the first efforts were, if I compare today, they were for us major successes. Simply to have had that courage to stand when you were supposed to go, even if it was just 10 of you, it was a major success. It was so empowering. And also, I started to see sometimes like the people with power also have fear. When they meet you alone and they wear your papers and they treat you anyhow, then they're very strong. And sometimes when 5 of you resist, you notice they were like always a bit unsettled and not quite sure how to react, because they never expected that type of reaction from a woman or from... So they check the bus and everybody is so quick to give their tickets, and you say, why are you controlling me? You have to control everybody else. And they were like shocked a bit. Yeah.
And then?
Yeah, then sometimes they refused, and then you have to get off and they want to see your passport and all these things. And once in a while they say, okay, then they start from the front and they come to the back. And then, yes, okay, here. So, but these were very empowering moments.
And these were just in the 90s?
Yeah, 90s coming towards around 2000, then it got a bit more. Yeah.
What happened at the beginning of the 2000s? Can you tell me something
Beginning
about
of the 2000s, I have to think some more. I can't really remember now. Beginning of 2000, I think I started being more involved musically with kids. I started doing a lot because, around 2000, I didn't want my daughter to grow up alone, or to grow up in a totally white atmosphere. And and I was looking like to kind of create a group where where diversity could be explored, but not as an other, but as an equal. I was looking for a group like that for her, and I mean, this started already like in the school, in her school in the first years. Children started calling names, you know, nigger, this and that, and she would come home upset and tell me. And I said, but did you tell your teacher? And she said yes. And I said, what did the teacher say? She said, yeah, the teacher said I should say to him, krumme Türke, or some other insult. And I said, but this is not a solution. So I had a talk with the teacher, and the teacher was quite clear that, yeah, but he's a Turkish, so they can insult each other. If he calls her digger, she can call him this, and that one this. And I said, but I don't think that's the solution. You have to talk about racism. You have to talk about what it means, you know, that you have to discuss this topic with the children. I don't think calling each other names can be the solution. And I started that. I talked to a friend of mine who had a church, and saying, oh, I wish we could do something with the kids so they, you know, make music together and do this and that. And one time after I'd forgotten, she was like, LaToya, you said this. Are you still interested? And I said, yes. And she said, you can do it here. And I was like, I'm not prepared. She said, yeah, just do it. So that's how it started. So I said, okay, intercultural choir for children, all nationalities, and this and that. And yeah, so a lot of friends supported me and brought their children. And yeah, that was how that started. And it went very well. Then we'd talk about the different countries and learn songs, and I would talk about African culture and what certain things means. We would discuss values, different values, and things like that. And we had, at first we had the rehearsals in the church, and then later I realized the children with a Muslim background weren't coming. It was hard for them to, so I just thought, okay, then we change it to the house. And it was really nice. We had different children there, singing together, eating together, and yeah, I spent a lot of time on that. And just interested, I think, just not even so much teaching them anything, but just giving them a platform where they could sit as equals and discuss with each other. Because sometimes I would just be around and hear the discussions, you know, and they had a way of solving things themselves and finding a fair solution by themselves, you know. There was no need to teach or talk or say we are all equal, nothing. They did it themselves without really interfering, you know. So this was really nice. And eventually we started also discussing sometimes social issues or political issues, like, oh, this is going on, and what do you think? In the next performance, what project would you like to support? Yeah. So we did different things like performing in prisons. They would look and say, okay, we want to support this. Ärzte ohne Grenze, we find it good, and because of this. And decide within themselves also. So it was really nice. It was, I think I could say I learned a lot from them, you know, because they were actually uh, organizing a lot. They did do, yeah. They all turned out to be very beautiful people. Yeah. So that I would say was a time when I was kind of, I think also it was a very good time for me because I was a bit frustrated with the activism. It's like it wasn't really, or I didn't feel it was making an impact. It's sometimes very hard to see people in difficult situations and you put a lot of energy but nothing happens. They still get deported or and the working with the children was a very good way of balancing it out. That was a very, yeah, also very healing. Yeah.
And then?
Yeah, and then then I worked. I continued working, and eventually a friend of mine asked me to take over her group. We had been working with an organization. They had built it up, Akonda, Eine Welt Café. Some friends had started it. Daniela Conradi, Ondana, Mudokwenyu, Claude Bosho, they had decided, okay, let us try to get a space where we, refugees, can also give consultation to other refugees because we understand the issues better and so the church, Kreuzkirche, agreed to give such a space. And then it started, and with German lessons, consultation on legal issues, immigration issues, all these things, health, support for people without any documents. And yeah, then I started to realize I was hearing again the same stories of, yeah, my child is being deported and things. And then I really got very upset because I thought this happened 10 years ago, and in my daily life everybody is very friendly and much more much more open, and I couldn't imagine that, okay, the society has advanced, you know, but the immigration laws are still the same. 10 years? I'm like, no, yeah, it's still like that. And yeah, then we started working a lot on this again and say, okay, we have to make information events and let people know what's going on. And yeah, so at Akonda we started again, being much more active again, inviting lawyers and having discussions, and also looking at other countries, what is going on, showing films, and basically, yeah, self-empowerment and things like that.
Around what time are we talking? Like which year is it?
Now, 2000, we're now 17, 10, 2000, maybe 2005, something like that.
Were the times different from like times of activism in the 90s and the times of 2005?
Yes, I would say it was, because there were more people. At least in my environment, there were more people being active. And not only were there more people being active, I also had what do you call it? My English. I also had people who I could learn from, mentors. Yeah. I also had people who were fearless, you know, who could. So you feel much more motivated than in the 90s, where I would say it was kind of like, sometimes at certain meetings, yes, I was empowered, but in my circle, when I went back home, I was alone. And but in the 2000, I would say we had a nice group of people around me who were conscious, who were active, and committed, very, very committed. In the 90s, the people I had around me were more like, it was really hard then to get your papers and try to stabilize your status so you get your visa, and people didn't want to break the law. I think also the risk of being deported then was higher. It was very easy to say, okay, we're not going to extend your visa. Yeah. I mean, I also had, at that time too, I also had major problems with my status. I wasn't given automatically my papers because I came with a tourist visa. I was, when there was the conflict, when the conflict came to Freetown, I went to the German embassy and explained, oh, I've been in Germany before and I want to go back. My husband is there, and she said, okay, I will help you. Because I spoke German and she wanted to help me. So she said, I'm not allowed to give you a tourist visa, but I will give it to you. And so I came. But when I came, they were like, no, why do you have a tourist visa? You're not supposed to have a tourist visa. We have to investigate this. And so they refused to give me my visa. And they were like, and you have to go back because we don't change. The tourist visa cannot be changed to another residence permit. If you come with a tourist visa, you have to go back. So the first years, I also had to be very careful because whatever could result in you being deported. Yeah.
So when did your status change?
My status changed like after we were married, so I think I had to wait like 5 years. I think after 5 years and all my papers were together, then it was okay. Then I just changed it. Yeah. Then I said okay.
We were talking about the times from around 2005 onwards.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go back to that period of time. So you talked about the first, coming back to activism. What were your first efforts during that time?
My first efforts, I would say, were just meeting with people, networking, informing others. You know, like sometimes I would meet with people and they're like, oh, this is the law. And I'd say, no, that's not right. And we have to do something. You can do something about it. When you go there, tell him, you know, this is not right. At least just showing a little bit of resistance, not being so compliant. And then we started looking also for lawyers, you know, trying to find lawyers who could, you know, at least take up a case. But yeah, years later I got to realize it had nothing to do with law, because the lawyer can only work within a certain legal frame, and if that's not there, there's nothing he can do. But yeah, the first steps, you thought, okay, we have to find and organize and find a good lawyer and put money together and pay and, you know, things like that.
How did you get money?
Working, working and saving and things like that. Yeah. Yeah, working without work permit. Sometimes not getting paid. You know, these things.
And what happened then?
Yeah, what happened then? Then eventually I worked for I think 8 years in a design company, and
What was your job?
graphic design. Yeah, graphic design. Yeah.
So you worked as a graphic designer until when?
Oh, I'm very bad with dates. Yeah, let me think. When I started, I think Jamila was maybe 3, 8, 11. Until when? Maybe till 2000, now we have 2017. 2007. Maybe somewhere there. Yeah.
And after your work at the graphic designer, what did you do?
Yeah, then I was independent. I worked independently as a designer also for about maybe 6 years. Yeah.
Did your work as an activist ever stop?
No, no, I don't think it ever stopped. There were times where other things were more or less, but I don't think it ever stopped really.
Looking back, so not only as life as like an individual, also as an activist, what was the use of it? Like was there a use of it? Was there an effort, or was there a development?
Yes, there's been a lot of development. There's been a lot of development in that today, if I look, I think refugees can be seen as subjects now, not just objects. And those days it was totally unheard of to stand up and protest and or ask why racial profiling and to publicly protest such a thing. It wasn't possible then. And if I look at that, the self-confidence, the empowerment which is within the refugee community, I would say yes, there is progress, a lot of progress. Regarding the policies, I would say there's not so much progress. But I think sometimes it's also about claiming what is yours and not just having it being given to you. So I think refugees, migrants today do claim what is theirs, and this is very, very progressive. I mean, even the structures are in place, you know. So we have people here without papers and they are living, you know. A friend of mine still doesn't have her papers. She came here she was supposed to come here as a au pair, but it was a kind of trade. She didn't know. And so she managed to escape but she doesn't have any documents, and she cannot go back home because she owes too much money. They paid for her ticket and they want it back and all these things. So she's here now like 20 years without any documents, but she has a hairdresser salon. And nobody would imagine what her past was or that she doesn't have documents. And there are children here who that's also a major thing, like in the schools. The schools are not forced to report if a child doesn't have papers. This is very, very progressive. So children are here, they don't have to be separated from their parents because the immigration doesn't give a visa. So they stay, they go to school. I mean, there are other challenges due to the fact, but I can say structures are being in place. There are lots of doctors who I'm so grateful for, who I work with. And if people without papers need medical treatment, I can talk with them and they are treated. So their health facilities are there. Even housing, if we take the Lampedusa struggle, there were members of civic society providing housing. So I think this is how we claim the space, you know. Even when it's not given to us, we still have some power to create systems and structures which are fair to people.